Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Hart, and today I'll be breaking down the 5-game NBA slate we have for Tuesday night. If you're new to the channel, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on that notification bell. I'll be going over my favorite spin-up plays, some mid-range options, and some value plays for each team that we can look at for tomorrow night's 5-game slate. So once again, if you can hit that like button, do truly appreciate all the support I've been getting recently. I can't thank you guys enough for that, and let's get into the slate's breakdown. Starting out with this first game, Memphis and the Pelicans. For Memphis, we got Ja Morant at the top, 10-1. Looks like one of the best spin-ups on the slate, if not the best. Desmond Bane is out, so Ja Morant is going to carry the load for Memphis as usual. Should see at least 35 minutes. Obviously going to shoot the ball a ton. Hasn't been shooting it well from three, pretty much all season, besides the first few games. So I do kind of expect and hopefully hope that he hits those threes, because if he does, he can go for 40, 50 real life points here in the spot against the Pelicans. So I do really like Ja Morant right now. As I said, Desmond Bane is going to be out this game tomorrow. So obviously, Ja looks fantastic. Dillon Brooks, I think he looks decent. With Desmond Bane out, Dillon Brooks should see, I'd say at least 15 shots in this matchup. Coming off the game where Ja and Bane were both out, Dillon Brooks only played 28 minutes. It was in foul trouble. Shot 7 of 22, so he did not do good at all, but still got 27 fantasy points. So even playing alongside Ja, he'll still have a decent amount of usage. I kind of expect this Minnesota stat line game from him: 9 to 17, 21 points, 4 rebounds. Not going to do much peripheral stat wise. So at 6K, looks like a decent price point for him. With Desmond Bane being out, someone's going to have to be that secondary scorer, and I do think Dillon Brooks is going to step up for that department. Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to give it a go tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see, how many minutes he gets. I would assume maybe 20-ish, around there, 15 to 20. We'll have to wait and see. But with him back, I guess it does hurt, Brooks' usage a little bit. I don't think enough yet. So I do feel fine going to Brooks as that secondary scorer. But yeah, Jackson Jr. obviously shifts Santi to the bench. Makes Steven Adams a little less appealing just when it comes to rebounds. So yeah, I mean, it's really just Ja Morant, Dillon Brooks at the top for me. I think, Jaren Jackson Jr. being back kind of takes Steven Adams out of play, makes him more of just a tournament low-owned play there at 5,500 in this matchup. Santi moving to the bench 5-1, I think is too expensive for him. Minutes are going to cut down a ton. I think Tyus Jones would see at least 20 minutes, maybe closer to 25, being that first guard off the bench for the Grizzlies. Now, he's not going to come in and shoot the ball a ton like that last game where, Bane and Ja were out. But I do think we can kind of expect that game versus San Antonio, at least 20 minutes. Should shoot the ball hopefully around 10 times. Going to get you some assists, maybe some rebounds. So I think at 5K, it's not the best value, but I do think if you want to force him in, you could. I'm not saying it's the best play, but I do think, you could definitely look to him a little bit. But otherwise, it's just like really no interest on this team besides Ja and Brooks, just with, Jaren Jackson Jr. coming back, kind of takes all those other secondary plays out of play, like a Conchar, like a Brandon Clark, David Roddy, all those guys below him. I really think it's just, kind of look to Ja Morant at the top and then Dillon Brooks, and that's really it, unless you want to take a dart throw on Steven Adams. On the Pelican side, Zion is questionable. We'll assume for right now that he's in. So if he's in, at the top, 8-7. I mean, it's a decent price tag for him. Pretty solid matchup. I'd prefer, as I've said the past few slates, just getting down to CJ. The price has dropped. He hasn't shot the ball well. I think it's kind of the order, the reverse order of the salaries. I think my favorite play would be CJ, then followed by Brandon Ingram, and then Zion. But at that price tag, it will scare people away. He'll be pretty low owned, but I just don't think I can get there. Brandon Ingram looks solid. It's just, kind of has a limited ceiling playing along the other two stars. So if Zion's out, it does really help Brandon Ingram. I think him and CJ would be fantastic plays if Zion's out. Prefer getting to CJ, even if Zion's in. I mean, the minutes are safe. Shot attempts are safe. He just hasn't shot the ball well. He's been great at getting rebounds, great at getting assists. Maybe his, assist number or up maybe 1 or 2 more assists per game than usual, just because he hasn't been shooting the ball well. But, I mean, yeah, I really like CJ here, 7,900. Pretty solid price tag for him, so he's one of my favorite plays for tomorrow. Who else? J-Val, he's kind of more of a contrarian play there at 7,200. The minutes have not been great on him this season, so far. He can get you there in a limited amount of minutes, 29, solid 62 fantasy points, but it's just hard to trust him. I don't know if you really, it'd be hard to kind of go out of your way to play him, but if you fall on him, I don't hate it. Larry Nance, I think he makes a solid value play, coming off of 28 minutes. They like to close with him. Pretty solid shooting the threes in the corner. Will get you some rebounds. So I do like Larry Nance a good amount there at 4,700. Herb Jones looks like an okay value play. Minutes were down a little bit in the Houston game, but I do kind of expect more in that 25 to 30-ish range from him. He'd be a solid value play. Not the worst, not the best. I don't really think you can kind of expect him to score double-digit points unless Zion's maybe out. Maybe Herb Jones looks to score more, shoot the ball more. That's kind of what you're hoping. Otherwise, if Zion's in, all those main starters are in, I don't really think you need to take a shot on a guy like Herb Jones or Trey Murphy. It just really, you want to get to one of those two guys if one of the main three stars are out, which potentially could happen to Zion. Jose, I guess he's a punt play, should see in between 12 to 20 minutes. Can get you there in that small amount of time, with the steals, but I really think it's just, stick to those main three. If you want to get super contrarian, look to J-Val, and then Larry Nance is a solid value, and then Herb Jones, I think he makes a great, value play, and I think even Trey Murphy does if Zion's out. I would look to one of those two wings to kind of come off the bench, and I think, obviously Herb Jones starts, but I do think you could look to one of those two wings as another solid value play alongside Larry Nance if Zion's out. On to the Clippers in Dallas. For the Clippers, we know most of their usage in scoring is going to come from Paul George, so he looks like a solid spend up. I don't know why he's more expensive than Ja. Really doesn't make much sense. So I do think his ownership will be pretty low there. So if you want to go for a low owned, pretty solid star, Paul George is going to be your guy. No one should really be able to handle him on Dallas in terms of defending him. Zubac looks decent here. He does have a good matchup against those Dallas bigs. I just think this game's going to be pretty slow. Not the best kind of game environment, game script that we want for, fantasy players. But, he's solid. Does have that double-double upside. Can get you some blocks as well. Hasn't really, had that block upside since that Spurs game where he had 4. But yeah, he makes more of like a contrarian, okay play there at 6,600. Not the best price tag for him. Morris, okay, 6,100. Not a ton of interest. John Wall it looks like he'll be back. He was ruled out for tonight's game just because it was back-to-back. Do expect him back tomorrow. So at 5,200, I do have a good amount of interest in John Wall here. Should see, his minutes are slowly creeping up. Before it's kind of floating around 20. Now it's kind of getting close to 25. He's shooting it at least 10 times a game. So I do like him here at 5,200. I think he'd be my second favorite play behind Paul George. Powell's just, a dart throw value play. He's been doing decent the past few games, but it's one of those things. He can go out there and get you 10 fantasy points in 25 minutes. So at 4,600, he's just a risky value play. Terrence Mann should kind of drop back down to 15 minutes with John Wall coming back. It kind of takes, where is he? Reggie Jackson, a little bit out of play. Reggie is still starting, but he just hasn't been the best this year. He'd be an okay value play at 5,100. But I do prefer getting to John Wall. That's really it. I would think that, Luke Kennard would still probably start. He just doesn't do enough for me to get to him. I guess if you want a super cheap, dart throw value play, you could look to Luke Kennard. But it's really, for me, I really think it's just, you stick to Paul George, you stick to John Wall, and then maybe you take a shot on Zubac. And then if you really want to force something, look to either Reggie Jackson or Dwight or Norman Powell. On the Dallas side, we got Luke at the top. As of right now, there's not enough value plays for us to get to Luka. So if you want to get super, contrarian, you could try to get him in your lineup, but it's really going to harm or hurt you at 12.8. That's just so expensive. He's coming off a triple-double, but we know what we're going to get from him. He always seems to do well against the Clippers, as we saw in the bubble. He absolutely destroyed them. He loves going against them, so he looks obviously great. It's just hard to get to him right now. Dinwiddie, with Christian Wood back as that secondary scorer, he still did pretty well off the bench, 27-6. I don't mind riding this hot streak. The price really hasn't changed. He's still going to be probably that secondary scorer. So I do like him a good amount. I don't mind getting to Christian Wood. he's kind of flashed a pretty low floor at times. He's pretty foul prone, but I think it's a solid matchup going against the Clipper backups. There's no one going to be. I think it's just a solid matchup for him overall. At 6,500, I think it's a solid price tag to get to him. Should keep people away, so I think he does look decent. Everyone else on this team, only other player I'd like to take a shot on would be Tim Hardaway Jr. just because he's getting the minutes. He's going to shoot the ball a ton, so he looks solid at 4,400. Otherwise, I really don't think you need to get to Powell. Just not a good point per minute guy. DFS has been terrible this year. I mean, you could force it with him. You could force it with a guy like Bullock at 3,200 now, but they just look gross. Green's slowly starting to get more minutes over Bullock, but at 3,300, he looks like an okay value play. It's really just, Tim Hardaway off the bench, and that's really it. Because otherwise, it's, one of the three main guys, and it's just, that team's so gross when it comes to offense. It's pretty much just Luka and Dinwiddie and Christian Wood, and then really no one else can score the ball besides Timmy off the bench. On to the Knicks versus Utah. Randall's been great so far with Mitchell Robinson kind of gone and clogging the paint. Randall's kind of been able to do his thing, 30-plus minutes in pretty much every game so far this season. So I think he's a lock for 35 minutes. He's been shooting the ball decently well. He's been shooting a ton of threes too, and he's been shooting them great. 8 of 13, 4 of 8. Obviously 0 of 7's not good, but then 3 of 6. He's he's pretty much been 50% or better 3 out of the past 4 games. I'm not sure if we can kind of expect that to continue. But if you want to ride this hot streak for Julius Randle and a very solid matchup, we saw what Joel Embiid did to the bigs last night. Now it's Julius Randle's turn, so I do like him a good amount here. Kind of a little bit of a limited ceiling, but I do think, a solid play there. I love Jalen Brunson, 6,800. He absolutely destroyed Utah last year. I know the team's a little bit different, but he should be getting at least 30 minutes. He's shooting the ball a good amount. I do like the matchup going against Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, not the best defenders. Coming off a pretty bad game, didn't really shoot the ball a ton. 5 and 9, 17, 7, 1, 3 steals. I mean, obviously the 3 steals really helps out his fantasy score. Because otherwise, you'd be at like 25 fantasy points, and that's just not a game you kind of want from Brunson. So I do like a bounce back spot here for Jalen Brunson. Kind of expecting him to get close to that 40 fantasy point mark. Anything over is great. Barrett, I think he makes more of a contrarian play. He's never really had any ownership so far this season. He's had, he's flashed some good games. But I kind of just prefer getting to Brunson as that main ball handler. But, Barrett is there if you want to get to him at 6,400. He's been doing better recently. Isaiah Hartenstein moved into the starting 5. So if he's in the starting 5, I do like him at 5,300. He's a pretty solid point per minute guy. So we'll kind of just wait for the starting lineup news. But if he's in, I do think he makes for a good play there at 5,300. Mitchell Robinson is questionable. If he's back, it does take some interest away from me for Randall. And obviously Hartenstein would probably be coming off the bench. I do think you can get to Hartenstein if he's coming off the bench. As we saw at the beginning of the season, he was pretty productive coming off the bench. Saw around 20 to 25 minutes because Mitchell Robinson is pretty foul prone. So I do think you could definitely play Hartenstein. Obviously his ownership would be pretty low if Mitchell Robinson's back. But, you got to keep an eye on that Mitchell Robinson news. The rest of this team, quickly had a solid game against OKC. He's just more of that 15 to 20 minute guy. I don't think you really need to force him unless you expect this game to get out of hand. Cam Reddish had a very solid game in that starting lineup, 10 of 17. I just don't think you need to force it. As you can see, he really only had a good game at the beginning of the season and then that last game. So yeah, I just don't trust it enough to get to him at 4,500. Obi seen around 15 minutes. Don't think you need to get to him. With Mitchell Robinson potentially back, don't think you need to get to Sims. Fournier is kind of falling out of the lineup. That's really it. Quentin Grimes is kind of back, so he's going to eat into Fournier's minutes. Yeah, it's really no interest for any of these guys besides Brunson, Randall if Mitchell Robinson's out, Hartenstein if Mitchell Robinson's out, and I do have a little bit of interest in Hartenstein if Mitchell Robinson is still in. On to the Utah side, we have Laurie, 7.5. He looks solid. It's just a solid price for him. Not the best, not the worst. Clarkson, more of a contrarian, tournament play there, but he's score independent. 6,300, I guess, is a solid price for him. Mike Conley, you can go to him. He does have a little bit of a ceiling. If he gets you 35, 36 fantasy points, very solid, but He just hasn't been good enough for me to roster him there at 5,600. Kelly Olynyk and Vanderbilt, kind of the two similar plays. They're very solid point per minute guys if they're staying out of foul trouble. If they do, they could easily pay off their price tags. I do think I'd prefer getting to Vanderbilt, even though he's a little bit more foul prone. But yeah, they look like they're there. Solid values. Sexton would be my favorite value play, 4,400. Slightly score independent, decent at getting some assists and rebounds. The minutes aren't as secure with him. I'd hope, at least 20. Really prefer getting him at 25 minutes, but 4,400, he'd be my favorite play from this side. Malik Beasley's had a few good games, so if you want to ride that hot streak, you can definitely do it. But once again, if he comes out and shoots like 0 of 4, 1 of 5, he could really get his minutes cut in half. So keep that in mind. But yeah, he looks decent there, 4,200. Horton Tucker's been solid the past few games in terms of, fantasy output. I don't trust it. 15 minutes at most for him is not the best. That's really it. It's just, taking that shot on a guy like Beasley. Do prefer getting to Sexton. He's a little bit safer. You can look to one of those two bigs, but I really think it's just, looking at Clarkson or Lowry. Moving on to Brooklyn and the Kings. KD, 11-2, looks great at the top. Claxton, I do have a good amount of interest in Claxton. He left that game with the eye injury. Looks like he's probable, as we saw before, 43, 23.5, 37.5, 39, 36. Got that double-double upside. Has an upside with the blocks, so not the best matchup going against Sabonis, but I do like him a good amount. Ben Simmons is questionable. I would assume he'd be good to go because he sat out the other game, but I don't think he's playing enough minutes to play him at 5,700. I do like Royce O'Neal as a very solid value play there at 5,200. The minutes are secure. It just comes down to if he's going to hit his shots. If he does, he's easily going to pay off that price tag. If not, he should at least get you about 20 fancy points. So I think he makes for a very safe play there at 5,200. Cam Thomas, don't think you need to go there. Seth Curry should be back. Yeah, it looks like he's probable. You could take a shot on him. He is scoring dependent, but 4,200, he makes for a great value play. Should see at least 25 minutes. Do expect him to handle the ball a good amount too. So that kind of takes Edmond Sumner on to play. He'll kind of be that, risky 15 to 25 minute, maybe at most, value play. But yeah, I really prefer just getting to Seth. Joe Harris, you can take a shot on him. Hope he has a really good shooting game. Otherwise, I don't think you need to get to him. That's really it. Moving on to the Kings. Sabonis, great matchup here going against the Kings. Priced up to that point where don't really think many people will be on him. That price is going to scare people away, but he could easily pay off that price tag. As we saw last game, almost a triple-double. Does have that upside. So if you want to get there for ownership's sake, don't mind it. Fox, just a little too pricey for me. I think his ceiling is a little too limited for a guy that high. He's kind of averaging around 45 fancy points, and the 8,800 is not the best price, but his ownership will be low because of that. Herter makes for a decent tournament play, 5,400. Great price for him. It just comes down to if he's hitting the shots. He's been solid peripheral stat wise. Can't have some bad games in that area, so he's just more of a risky tournament play if you need a guy in that low 5K range. Murray, just too scoring dependent for me, but at 4,800, he looks okay. Barnes has been doing a little bit better recently, besides that Golden State game. But I just don't think there's a path where you need to play Barnes unless you're just like, screw it, really want to burn my money. And then if he gets lucky, he actually does well. But yeah, don't think you need to get there. Monk looks like an okay value play, 4,600. Minutes are kind of all over the place, 27, 21, 24. I think we can at least expect 20, and at 4,600, it looks okay. He can't get on fire. So I don't hate it, but yeah, that's really it. And then moving on to the last game, Spurs and Portland. Spurs got absolutely blown out by the Warriors tonight. I think the game finally ended, but yeah, I don't know why they really bumped up the price tags on the Spurs, but Keldon Johnson, 7,600, he did terrible tonight against the Warriors. So I do like buying back here on Keldon Johnson. Back-to-back. Maybe they get blown out again. Who knows? But yeah, he looks solid. Same thing with Vassell. Maybe I prefer getting to Vassell for that price difference, but they both look pretty solid. Same thing with Podol. It's pretty much just three main guys for me. Trey Jones, what to keep an eye out if he's out again. If he's in, looks decent. If he's out, I'd say look to Josh Richardson, Didn't play well either tonight. I mean, this whole team just played bad. Bassey priced up to 4,100. He should see around 15 minutes. He did really well the past few games, but I don't know if you can trust that. Jeremy got the start tonight. He did okay. Bates Diop did okay. It really just comes down to if Trey Jones is in or out. So let's keep an eye out on the news. And then Portland, Dame's just going to be that, high owned or high salary guy that people are not going to roster just because he's pretty limited when it comes to his stealing, just because he doesn't get a ton of peripheral stats. He's been doing better recently, the past 2 games, 7-6, 12-7. But yeah, he's a guy who can go out there and get you 41 real life fantasy points or 41 real life points and like 60, 70 fantasy points. So I do like him as that contrarian star play at 9,900. He should be pretty low owned. Simons looks okay there. Just a tournament option play. Grant, just a little too pricey for me with everyone in there. I know he's coming off of 2 fantastic games. Don't really trust that. I mean, the usage is going to be going through Dame and Simons. So Grant, I think those are a little bit of outlier games. You really just want to get to him if one of those 2 main guys are out. Nurk, I would assume, should be back. If he is, I do have a good amount of interest there for Nurk at 6,900. Should be a pretty solid matchup going against Podol. Hart, with everyone back, looks okay. Just more of a contrarian tournament play. Winslow should see about 25 minutes off the bench. He'd be an okay value play at 4,600. If he's out, I guess you could look to maybe Wofford, but I don't really trust it. Shaden Sharp dropped all the way down to 4,000. Yeah, it's really just, get to Dame. I mean, you could play Eubanks if, Nurk is still out, but I assume Nurk is still going to be back. The only value play I do like off the bench for Portland would be Keon Johnson, 3,700. I think we could expect maybe 15 to 20 minutes out of him. Decent point per minute guy. So he'd be my favorite value play. Let's just assume for now Nurkic is in, and same with Winslow. So yeah, it's really just Dame at the top or Nurk for me on the Portland side. As of right now, obviously there's some news we have to wait on, but I do really like Brunson. Do really like CJ. Gonna have to go to chalky Ja Morant as of right now. And then let's see my 3rd or 4th favorite play going into this slate tomorrow, just based on the news we have right now. It's kind of a gross slate, to be honest, guys. I'm gonna throw in Claxton as right now. So yeah, this is kind of the route I'm looking to go for tomorrow night's slate, based on the news we have right now. Obviously 19 hours before the slate starts. So if you're new to the channel, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notification bell. Do truly appreciate all the support. I hope you guys like this breakdown. I'm trying to get to, trying to get a little bit more in depth when I talk to these teams in terms of like, who's the best play, who's, tournament options, contrarian plays, and then who's the value we can look to as of right now. So if you guys like the video, hit that like button. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.